Yes.
Sorry?
Okay. That was a question, yeah.
Yeah, it's because I've got hardly any computer space left. Okay, and now I have to somehow, does it make you a host while I'm doing this?
I think we're already there. You're a co-host, I'm a host.
Okay, amazing,
Yeah.
thank you. So I'm really happy with that now. Okay, so rewind. Now let's all grind into the space, just all the techie stuff is out of the way so we can really land. So the reason that we 0 point is, I think that anybody who's here and anybody hopefully that's listening can understand that we're in a time with a lot of competing narratives and a lot of conflict around what is truth, and you know, it's pretty murky, and you know, people fight, get massive fights about what football team they like and all of that sort of thing. So I've spent quite a lot of time in Mexico, and I first started studying the galactic Mayan calendar around 2008, and then I started studying the traditional Mayan calendar around late 2012, but more early 2013. And from those times, the times where I was deepening my work in the Mayan lands, I started to see, you know, there was a lot of feuding around, you know, you either like the Dreamspell calendar, which is the more galactic, more recent calendar, or somebody's needing that into the room, or you like, or you study the traditional Mayan calendar. There's a kind of purist thing, and the different parties will say nasty things about some of the proponents of these systems. And I think that we can all see that there's a shadow in everything and amazingness in everything as well. So I gave a talk last year around some of the principles of non-dual astrology, because I think I've worked with Buddhism for quite a long time, but only really deeply as a practitioner for 2 years. And there was always something that just seemed very dualistic around these people who are supposedly aligned with space and time, really not having any headspace for these other systems. And having worked with them all, of the two Mayan ones, the Vedic and Western astrology, I can see a use for each of them, and they each have specific things they talk to. And when you put those together, you suddenly find these spaces in between where you can find, like in academic study where we triangulate things, you suddenly can find a place in between where you know that that's a stable outcome and that that's something to follow. So I've been giving quite a lot of readings recently, and it's just something that I love. And actually in the last few years, you know, because I spend a lot of time traveling and being on my own, and I used to sit at night and just watch astrology videos, and I'm just watching them. I didn't really know I was going to really start working so deeply with this. And it was just like last December when Vedic astrology had kept coming to me, and I was looking at a bit of it, and then some teachings appeared. And then it just really landed with me. And I have really I've gone so deep into it in the last year, been very grateful to receive a lot of teachings. And this is also in alignment with the fact that as a Kala Chakra Tantra practitioner, it's also a system that fuses different astrologies with concepts of high yoga and, of course, many sadhanas and many Buddhist practices, because it understands the microcosm of the body to time and how we as a human have got a divine role within that. And so it's almost like what I'm being asked to do is prepare my way for the Kala Chakra astrology, and the Vedic astrology is a backbone of Kala Chakra. And therefore, I'm loving doing this. And I had a reading that I'm going to mention these readings to you later in this talk. I had a reading from the rishis, like 6 months ago or whatever, and they said, oh, you work with astrology in it, and this was a reading that was made over 1,000 years ago for me. So I'm going to tell you, because you might want a reading that was made 1,000 years ago for you as well. Now bear with me, I'm just going to quickly grab some water because I'm thirsty. Okay, so water is here. So I want to give gratitude to the waters. They're coming in very importantly at the moment. Okay, cheers. So just for anybody who just came in, we're just situating ourselves. And I'm just giving an overview that this is a weaving between different systems. And predominantly, I'm going to be talking about Vedic astrology, the Guatemalan Mayan calendar, which is called the sacred calendar, or the Chokyu, and the Dreamspell calendar, which is also known as the galactic Mayan calendar. If you want a little bit more of an overview on those systems, I made a presentation last year, and that is available. If you message Dharma Stars, we can send you a copy of it. It's not online publicly because it's going to be part of a system of teachings, which will be, and it will be expanded upon. And also, I'm starting a course spread over a period of time. So on the 20th, I'll be beginning to deconstruct the Dreamspell calendar, because a lot of people with this kind of new age connection, it's a good place for people to start. But then I'm going to then explain the Chokil, the Mayan calendar, the sacred calendar. And then I will do some overviews around Vedic astrology and things like that after. And then there's going to be a journey, an immersion in space and time that will begin in the autumn of this year, if there's enough time to deliver it. Now, I haven't put this into this talk because this is very much about this year, but I think that everybody here probably is aware of how we are manipulated by certain forces that keep us constrained and out of sovereignty by warping time and creating these calendars that aren't actually in alignment with natural cycles. And these are the sorts of things I'm going to go into a lot more deeply in the actual presentations about such things. But I think that a lot of people are starting to realize, because we are all governed by natural law, and I know that that doesn't seem like it's the case a lot of the time, but it's true. And actually, that's one of the keys to our liberation, is actually understanding that we are governed by natural law and we're part of it, and that actually that will beat any other system. So if you are somebody who is adhering to natural law and natural time, you actually have the keys to emancipation within you. And this also aligns with the body politic and the soul and our karma and our dharma. The tools are within our own inner being, and predominantly within the Kundalini energies and within the central channel, because it's a gateway where life and death and higher thinking and higher being comes. As I literally make this presentation today, in the Galactic Mayan, in the Dreamspell calendar, they have a system which shows that the microcosm, macrocosm of the human into space and time, and everything is a fractal with the celestial bodies. And this is what I will go into more deeply in the next session on the 20th, which is actually a paid session because it's part of a course. So today, we are right at the center of the Sushumna, of the central channel. So we are at the exact center of that axis. So that's why it's such a perfect day for us to talk about zero pointing in space and time and non-dual astrology and everything like that. And who knows if they're fake photos? They're very pretty. I saw last night on Facebook, some people have shared photos from Arizona and Texas, and from Sedona, which is in Arizona, with the sun with rainbow halos around it. And they're like, wow, the new time has started. You know, I see a lot of these. I think a lot of us have seen a lot of this stuff on Facebook over the years, and often it's not true. So it's a very pretty picture, and I thought I like the timeliness of it. So this is a really nice time for us to talk about zero point in time and bringing timelines together, starting to open our mind to, well, it's not just Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur. It's not just this or that. And I think, you know, there's always a mechanism within natural law and time to be teaching the collective in a certain way that's going to really help us to upgrade if we wish to take the lessons, and if our karma has ripened enough to do so. And all of you here, you have some calling to be here. So your karma has ripened to start to want to emancipate yourself. And you're probably already very, very emancipated already. So that's a little bit, I guess, about, it's a very, very little bit. I could spend a whole talk on just the beginning bit on all of this and how this works. But I have seen some very profound signs when I've been working very deeply with certain yogas and certain pranayamas and certain practices and time, like it has stopped. And I really see what the rishis and the sages and the beings that brought through, the Kalki kings, the Shambhala warriors who've brought through the Kala chakra system are talking about how we work in space and time. Because ultimately, you see, we have the tools to our disposal to basically spot where our karmas are coming up and where lessons are coming, and just meet them head on. And it's like a computer game. You know, I think we're really realizing we're in a computer game, aren't we? So the Vedic system is very good for that, but there are also keys and tools within the other systems. So I'm going to really today talk about that and predominantly talk about the earlier months of this year. So that's hopefully a little bit about why we combine from different systems. I think we're ripe for that now. Enough people have got really bored of, you know, subject and object, this and that. And I feel that part of the ascension process that we're in is actually to really realize that we are not just created within a dualistic framework. And that's why starting to open ourselves to multiple possibilities and the tantric weaving between those to create more of a broader worldview is going to be helpful, especially for those of us holding space and working from compassion. So I'm not going to go too much into the shortcomings and strong points of each system, but yeah, so you can request the Art of Non-dual Timekeeping presentation I made last year, which will have extra teachings added to it. I'm going to start with the Chokyo, the sacred calendar, and just short version of that is, you know, it's like the marker point of a natural law, natural time system, which gives every day a specific energy, and everybody has a different numerological tone and vibration, and they have a sign and a Mayan cross, which really articulate their role in society and the influence of the ancestors and the masculine and feminine line, and what sort of energy they're going to step into as an elder. And now obviously that life expectancy has increased to like a further elder. So it's working around very sacred cycles, and it looks a lot at the gestation time of corn for some of the cycles. It's utilizing the fact that there are 13 tones and we have 13 major bones in the body. It uses 20 signs and we have 20 digits. So there's already a placing of the human into a fractal of natural law and time there. And it's interesting because if you go to places like Lake Adatlan and the areas which are where a lot of the how would I say, the retention and preservation and gatekeeping of that calendar sits, the day keepers really hold time there. It's a very interesting place because yes, people have mobile phones and things, but they still wear traditional dress. And if you walk down a street, you could feel like you've traveled in time because they're still working around those same cycles. And a lot of their life is still very, very traditional. And what's very interesting is that area, there are 2 times in the year where the sun is right above at midday. So that's a very important marker on the planet if you understand the planetary and the celestial bodies, because that's why I like using it. It's a marker. But it's not necessarily cosmic. It was made from a time, you know, if we look at the cycles of history and how we look at things, it's often subjective to the time in history that we're in. So it has its limitations because it's holding a key there, which has got some really great principles about the sort of person and role you're going to play in your community, and you know how your energies move through you. And there are some karmic aspects to it because you grow, and it also it's amazingly accurate. It will show you if you speak to someone and say, okay, at 14 and a half you were changing into this energy, they'll be like, that's exactly when this happened. It's very, very accurate. But you know, those days gone by, a lot of them are, if we look back at things like medieval England and things like that, it's got this dark heaviness to it. And to some degree, the mythology and and the principles with which some of the codings were brought through, it's an underworld story. So we all need to work with the underworld. We all have to go into these shamanic processes, but we don't just reside there. And so I really like it for the fact that it brings us into a weaving with that. And even in these mythologies, and I'm speaking of the Popol Vuh, which is one of the seminal texts, the gods there said that the people reach divinity when they understand how to work with ceremony and work with time. And once they start to keep time and work with time, they become divine. And there's a journey of that's woven in that narrative. And then we get channeled in some ways through a series of awakenings and rememberings. Jose Arguelles brought through most of the Dreamspell calendar. He had many, many helpers, and his partner was also very key, Stephanie South, or Red Queen, as she's called. And he left his body in 2012. And lots of the purists really don't like Jose, but he was recognized by some of the day keepers of the Mayan lands. It's a little bit like Western astrology factoring in precession, which the Vedic astrology didn't do, which I'll mention very briefly later. It's almost like Jose had to bring things that were beyond that confined space and time, because we didn't all grow up in Guatemala. Okay, so we're not all from that land. So where the sun was and the moon was and all these things were when you were born is very different to anybody who's going to be born there. And so there's a lot in the system that's really good, because these markers are a great fractal, and they're more around lunar cycles and solar cycles, not 30-day months with 31-day months and crazy things. But it kind of needed a tweak, and it goes into the more metaphysical aspects. Now, it's not to say that didn't exist in the traditional Chokyo sacred calendar. It's just that the conquistadors destroyed everything, and the Popol Vuh is one of the only remaining texts. So I'm not going to say that it didn't exist already. So Jose came through, he brought his system, which is what a lot of kind of new agey people, spiritually people work with. And I found it very, very useful. And the way I would like to describe it is it's more transpersonal. So it has this spirit, it's talking about us as a spiritual being. In the traditional Mayan calendar, you're looking at a cross, which is telling your role in society. This is more telling your role in a sacred ecosystem. And there are a lot of keys and insights within that calendar, which are about your kind of like your extrasensory perception. Are you a channel? Do you work with art, but do you work with sacred sexuality? Do you work with life and death transitions? Do you work with shamanism? That's all in that system. Okay, so it's beautiful for looking at that. And there's one argument that can be put forward that even if it wasn't accurate, some people really try to say it's not accurate. I dispute that for several reasons, and I may go into them. Basically, I can't remember what I just said, but it's very, very accurate for helping us to look at the energies of when we might want to do something on a certain day, and who to co-create with, and where our shadows are that are deficits to become gifts, things like that, which aren't depicted in the Chokyo. The Chokyo is much more functional, which this is the problem, is you get all these new age woo-woos who don't want to do a day's work. And all this kind of spiritual narcissism that we see at the moment, which is actually just a covered up trauma, isn't it really? And there's something beautiful of seeing your role in a functional society that's in the Guatemalan system. But yes, we're spiritual beings, and we don't come from Guatemala or those Mayan lands. And we also have come, a lot of us have come with this star seed energy, this bodhisattva energy. Some of us have had quite a few goes around the block and have come here to help. And there was no space for that in this older system, because we weren't there then. So this system is really, really helpful for marking that. And today in that system is where we're right in the center of the Kundalini. And the thing is that when we release codes and share information and work with certain codexes, especially with this system, I find and work in the collective. We really help the telepathic grid to upgrade. We help this grandmother dreaming to weave. And we need this at this time, but it's not suitable for all people. And you know, some of the shadows were like Jose seemingly kind of put himself in the middle of the calendar. And he said he was a certain incarnation. I have issues with people who proclaim themselves the reincarnation of so-and-so very loudly, rather than having, it's just like people don't proclaim themselves a shaman or an elder or a medicine person in indigenous tribes. But, and especially as we've spoken to some of the key elders who were there when Palenque was being discovered, where Jose felt he was the reincarnation of a leader called Pakal Vutan. But actually, if you speak to some of the oldest people who are there since Palenque was discovered in the late 40s, early 50s, they will say, well, Pakal Vutan's kind of like a made-up thing, okay? So Jose was bringing through a lot of this information in like the 80s and 90s, and we're here working with the cult of the ego and the shadow of that. And so if I was to say there was a shadow of that calendar, it might have been possibly his ego got in the way, like any of these kind of guru people when they go a little bit full on. But the system is very profound, and he did a lot of good. And I have friends who were some of his key advisors, you know, and they're great people. So that's those two systems very briefly. And then Vedic astrology was really brought through by these rishis, these super Mahasiddhas. And Mahasiddha is somebody who's highly realized, who's got very special skills. And it is said, many people say, if we look back to the time of people like the Buddha or these sages, people had a very good angle on prophecy and things like that. We're here right in the middle of the Kali Yuga at the moment. So we're at peak wonkiness. And so it means that we've all come in with quite a lot of karma to work through, whereas a lot of these sages came in and just could as I say, they can write you your chart for now. 1,000 years ago, I've had my chart done. And there's a lot of accuracy in it. So they brought through this system, which is Jyotish or Jyotisha, and it's the science of light, and it is a science. And they're really communicating with the innate intelligence of the celestial bodies, it's not just density, they're working with the archetypal energy and the medicine that is brought through different planets being in a certain position when we're born, and how that's all distinctly marked. So our karma is marked in there. So they have a marker for the soul. Their system, which has got all these yogas, it will tell when certain planets are going to be creating favorable results. It's also showing what different star systems we're doing in your chart at birth. And I'm going to be talking about some of the star systems that are going to be important for us this year. This was really helpful. But one thing that wasn't factored in necessarily was precession of the equinoxes, which is treated more deeply in Western astrology. And again, we have a soul, and our soul has a marker point, but we keep coming through these lives. And sometimes I feel that so firstly, part of the Vedic astrology, if you look at some of the ancient texts, it's very, very stuck in its own time. It's all about, you're going to get trampled on by an elephant, or, strange stuff that's very superstitious that doesn't apply to now. So that has to be shelved a little bit. And it is. There are many, many contemporary Vedic astrologers who are just amazing. But also, a lot of key Buddhist sages said, they knew that there was coming this age of degeneration, which we're in, and I actually think that they just didn't even know how weird it was going to get. And with Western tropical astrology, which is the one that most people know, we've got the progression of time, because there are these slight changes that have happened in time that people like Graham Hancock have talked about, how that if you factor that in, you can actually see the star markers and its relationship to sacred sites all around the world, because people hadn't factored in the precession of the equinoxes. And likewise, there are even some Vedic astrologers like Ernst Wilhelm who do make systems and calculations based on Vedic astrology, but applied beyond the sidereal zodiac, which is what we call the Vedic and other ones, like the Kemetic calendar is also sidereal. So we bring that forward, and you can kind of see how you show up in your most neurotic state in a way. You know, I'll give an example, like, you know, I landed with who I was in the Western astrology, and I think a lot of us have got used to that. And then you look at Vedic, and most signs will have changed a bit, because there's usually 23.5 degrees difference, and that will keep changing over time. And so I'm now making friends with, you know, I'm Virgo with a Cancer ascendant and moon in Pisces in Western astrology, and I've suddenly become Sun in Leo with ascendant Gemini with moon in Aquarius. Okay, and you know, at first it's like, oh, what are people doing to me? You know, what's happened here? This is not okay. But this is part of the tantric dance, is opening the space to look into that, because actually you'll find that it's all in there. Like my Virgo is somewhere, and my Cancer is in somewhere, and when we do readings for people, you find it always lines up. But there's more in the Vedic astrology in terms of you know, where our karma sits, where our dharma is, this life, and things that, you know, inheritances in terms of good karma and bad karma, and where they're sitting and how to remedy those, which is great. And I feel that at this time, there's a lot of really lovely people that I know who've been drawn in the same sort of period of time to do Vedic astrology, because I think that it's not the cosmos is wanting us to do good stuff, and it doesn't want us to just get stuck in our here and now ringtone Instagram neurosis. Okay, it's like, guys, because you just do your stuff with your karma and get on with it. We need you. And so some of us are really being guided and going very fast at learning Vedic astrology. And for me, the application is to hook them all together. Okay. So, and I can say, you know, it's really helped me, because the Cancerian side can be really oversensitive and things like that. And the Pisces could be a bit wishy-washy, and I've got work to do. So getting my Leo, my Gemini on and other things has helped me to resource something that was already within us. And last year when I gave the talk, I said, you know, we hear about people who've had a stroke and one side of their brain goes out, and they learn how to do everything just through the other side of the brain. If we don't have access to this Vedic knowledge, then there's a really big chance we're not seeing where some of our potential lies, or how close we are to the gold with stuff that we've been going around in loops for forever with. So that's why I think there's this resurgence of Vedic astrology right now, because the cosmos is like, guys, you can actually heal from this. And the yogis used to say, you know, this, and the rishis said, you know, this was developed for the yogis so that they wouldn't get hit every time there's another big cosmic surge of crazy energy, because they know in advance, and they'd be able, if you know, you can prepare. So sometimes I'm like, oh, well, that's going to be a month where I'm not going to be much use, so that's when I'll do my inner work or whatever. And it's not always fully accurate, because, you know, of course there's always mystery, but it really helps, because they want us to be productive right now. They don't want us in this neurotic, self-cherishing mess of poor me, because that's not going to get us to the golden age, the Aquarian age. So that's again why these systems are here and coming together. So I'm going to move on to the actual big main part very, very soon. I just want to make a bit of a disclaimer here. You can see how huge this topic is and how long it's even taken me to get through the first slide. I'm going to speed up now, but I want to explain that these are called provisional teachings, what I'm giving. I'm not saying that anything's wrong. What I'm saying is I have to give you a basic version because of the level of understanding of different people, different systems, and the limitations of time. And of course, I've got plenty of limitations because I'm still a junior in some of these systems, but also just I'm collating some snapshots. If you got a proper Vedic astrologer in, they'd be going, well, why didn't you mention this? Why didn't you mention that? And simply because I've picked some really key bits to share with you today. And you're very welcome to come on the spaceship for more, because I'm happy to share more, but I've got some key goodies for now, okay? And I'm going to continue making little transmissions over the year. Okay, so to orientate you, because we're all neurotic Western people, I just talk a little bit about, you know, here we are, we're in 2022 in this calendar. And something that you probably all are aware of is that right here, right now, Jupiter has come into Pisces, and that's a good thing. Okay, now Jupiter's been in Aquarius and Capricorn before that, and it's not very comfortable there because those are Saturnian energies, and the Saturnian energies, they're more material. They want us to do things properly. They kind of can be a bit of a mood displacer and lower things. They make us have sacrifices. So Jupiter's always wanting us to be expanded. It's the guru. It's like big and wants good stuff. And likes to yield results, and Saturn is more cautious. Now, obviously, there's a divine mechanism in place that, you know, I think when we look at people's charts, we'll often say people hate Saturn, but Saturn's actually just great. And if you learn to work with Saturn, you do become more disciplined and more benevolent and spiritual. Saturn will actually give you good results. So there's nothing to worry about unless you're really off your path. So Jupiter in Pisces is now in a happy place for Jupiter. So it's super, super, super at home here. And Pisces is really spiritual, and it's also the last of the signs. So it does work between all the worlds, and also in some ways holds an imprint of all the other signs before it. That came in around the 29th of December, and Jupiter's going to come back and forward. It's going to retrograde. So it's going to be up for a while. Then around May, I think it goes back in, and then it comes back at the end of the year. And then we have next year a proper lift off of Jupiter in Pisces. So you probably all have felt this, oh, things are going fast again. I've got hope. I understand things again. This ding. And that's our Jupiter in Pisces. And the great thing is that it is going to retrograde and go back into a Saturnian energy, but at least into Aquarius, which is still looking at new societies and humanitarian stuff. So it's going to have a bit of sobriety in a way, because this is, it's clever right here, right now. We don't want to expand too much. We're not quite done. The backlog of what COVID has done to the collective hasn't really been seen yet. So we're getting hope. Hope is here. But then they'll sober us up again. So we're like, right, now I just really think about the collective. Don't go too fast, because Pisces can be quite into fantasy, okay? So it's like, right, come back. Now really think about how you're going to apply that to your communities. So that's a beautiful dance. And you're probably aware that Venus is in retrograde at the moment, and Mercury is going into retrograde in a few days until early February. So, so there are, again, we're in a review period, and it's interesting because obviously, you know, it's ironic that I'm making this, you know, at the beginning of 2022, because it's like a made-up date. It's not the beginning of the year at all. There are some astrological bits in Vedic astrology that are hidden. They were hidden by the gods because people were abusing them, that actually do mean that these dates are very important in early January every year. But it's not really the beginning of the year, because the beginning of the year is obviously around equinox time in the tropical Western astrology. And it's usually, it's around the moon phases that are around April for Vedic astrology. So it changes every year. So it's usually coming in, I think it's the first full moon of Aries. It might be new moon, so I just need to check that bit. But it's slightly different. It's not the exact same day as it is in the Western chart, but we're still over there in that part of the chart, okay, March, April. So what often happens is everybody's like, oh, I'm going to do this detox, I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to get ready, and then they get hit because it's not quite that new year energy. This year it is quite interesting because we've had this Jupiter and Pisces hope spurt, But then we got this kind of reality check with Mercury retrograde, kind of saying, don't launch all your new projects just yet, work behind the scenes on them. So it's actually wanting us to do things well. And this is what, people are always like, oh, this is awful. Actually, it's just a lot of these beautiful, intelligent cycles are here to ensure we don't make mistakes we made in past lives. So we don't have much room for fucking up right now on the planet, if you've seen the state of it. So there's all these beautiful mechanisms in place in the astrology over this year. And next year is going to be a biggie. And so in many ways, I feel that those of us who have worked through some karmas and have had some level of awakening, whatever that may be, we're open to seeing this information to kind of know, okay, I'm going to feel really like I'll start making my project then. And okay, this is a good day to launch, this isn't. Okay, and that's what this talk's going to be a lot about. So just know you're going to have a bit of, it's good to do your admin and things very soon. And I think in a way, that a lot of us have had, it's been very, very fast, crazy energy, especially this last week's been mental. But in a way, I also think it's like getting its mileage out of us. And now there's a lot we could say about Pluto and Uranus if we were looking at the Western astrology, but I'm not going to do that because you can go online and look at that yourselves. Okay, and just also worth looking at in Western astrology is things in Vedic astrology, and I'm going to be focusing more on Vedic astrology today because most of you aren't so aware of it, so there's something new I can offer. But things that are worth looking at as well in the Western astrology that Vedic astrology doesn't go into much because they were not visible to the eye and not in collective awareness when the rishis were bringing through these systems. They don't have the outer planets. They're not dealt with to a big degree in Vedic astrology, and you don't have things like the goddess asteroids. So those are things that are worth looking at and looking up in your chart for this year, because that's something that Western astrology can bring in. So I'm going to give you a really small snapshot about some of the time with these Mayan calendars that's similar, okay? And as I say, on the 20th, I have a proper teachy thing about that. So we have all these different energies, but there's a biomimicry in the Mayan calendars, which is, for me, it was really good to drop into that because it's understanding the moon cycle. So the Dreamspell calendar is sometimes called a 13-moon calendar because it sees 13 moons in a year. And it's still working around a solar cycle of 365 days a year. There's always still that quarter day that people have to work with. But in the Dreamspell calendar, they factor in, they're able to get the calculations going to get 360 days, boom, boom, there's fireworks going off. And then there's one day that's just not got, they have a day every year, the Dreamspell calendar, which is called the Day Out of Time. And every year that's on the 25th of July. And it's a day that people all around the world pray for peace and things like that. And in the Chokil sacred calendar, they also have a facility for the extra days. And they have these days that are kind of more shadow days so that they can basically work the astrology and put a place for things. They're kind of these spacey days, but everything else is kind of like clockwork, where we go through, as you see, these are these nawalis, as you might call them, or tzolkin. So these are all, everybody has got one sign, and you've all got a number attached to your sign. And then you've got 4 other signs that inform on your life. So your position in society, the influence of your ancestors in the Guatemalan system. And in the Jose Arguelles system, the Dreamspell calendar, you would have things about what's your higher self, what's your occult part, what's your unconscious, what comes easily to you, and what's challenging but it's actually going to become a gift. So actually, in both of these systems, Jose was adapting the original Nawalis. Okay, so there are these 20 signs, and this is like these 20 digits. So each of us has a special digit as well. And everybody's got one of these signs. And then what happened was Jose's channeling of the more transpersonal level kind of brought up the meaning of each of these. So actually, if you know all of these in either of the systems in order, you can jump between the two systems because there's a lot of similarities. And with some of the signs, the sign is pretty much the same. So sometimes people get very confused, but actually it's going in the same order. It's got a lot of similar principles. So every day, so for instance, we are today in the blue magnetic monkey in the Dreamspell calendar. And so this is a 13-day period, which we call a wave spell in this system, which will each have a different tone. So today's number tone 1, magnetic, tomorrow's number 2, lunar, and so forth, up to 13, which is the highest number. And so blue magnetic monkey, this is going to be very deep work with the magician, the sacred trickster, the inner child, but it's also got a connotation that carries over from the original calendar, which is about a weaver of time. So I hope you can see why I'm giving this presentation today. And in the Guatemalan system, or the sacred calendar system, it's number 6, Kame, and this is 6 world bridger, or 6 life and death. So it's a really good way for looking at cycles of life and death and rebirth. And we're in the Trecena, so the 13-day cycle in that system. We're in the Trecena of Kawok, which is the midwife. So it's a really good time, and 6 is the most balanced number. So it's bringing balance to midwifing you through space and time, and we're at the exact center point of the central channel in the Dreamspell calendar. So that's why we're weaving time today. So both systems have 13 tones. And so that denotes an energy of a person or an energy of a day. So an odd number is more activating and more unbalanced, but that brings about results or activations or challenges or connections with other realms. And the even numbers are more even, or more balanced. So as I say, it starts to be conveyed in the Guatemalan system, the Mayan system, that there's a connection between the being, the body, and the heavens. But Jose, in some of his work, there's a book called Accessing Your Multidimensional Self, which it just goes through the fractals, and then it shows how the human connects with the celestial bodies. And as I say, this is actually what's happening in Kalachakra Tantra as well. So I aspire to be able to help with teachings about that system in the future, because I am working with principles that do that through yoga and breath work. And I'm also teaching provisional teachings about that in a moment, because basically when we line those up and line our body and breath and yoga together, we are basically able to just pop through karmas and traumas. And this is also preparing ourselves to leave our body and not have to come back, but to also help to create a greater surge of cosmic energy on the planet. So, what else will I say about this? I'm going to talk more about those in the other days, because we've got a whole talk about just one system. We're going to have 2 talks about just one system, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, so we have a new Mayan solar, you have 260-day cycles in the galactic Mayan calendar. And we call those a galactic spin, because it's almost a 9-month gestation. There is a similar thing that happens in the Guatemalan system. It's just the numerology sits a little bit differently, but it's not exactly 9 months, but it's very close to gestation. And you can look at what you were doing. You can start to note the date of something, and what the energy of the day is. And then look 9 months later, and you will see a very deep growth. And so today's quite a deep marker point because of where we're at in this channel. So it's an honor to be able to share these teachings today. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much more in there. So this is where we are today, here. Bing. 131. Yesterday we were there. So we've been doing very big work these last 2 days. And I think everybody can probably say it's been a full-on week, hasn't it? So you see, this is why I have friends who don't know anything about the Dreamspell calendar, but I know they had a full-on week too. And we're right. This is where, you see, the principle is that these funny black ones are called gap days, and they're called galactic activation portals. And this is the days. So this sign and how it's depicted when you do it, when you're writing it for somebody's day, it's supposed to be denoting like a double helix. So these days, called gap days, these galactic activation portal days, are days that it's believed it's favorable to do quantum work, or that we can do deeper generational healing, and often you'll feel the veil's thinner. And so not that long ago, we had 10 gap days in a row. So you'll often find those very profound times. And then we're coming in very soon. So we're here in like 10 days or so. We're going to come into another 10 galactic activation day portals. So the thing is that, and so that's mirroring in a way the Ida and Pingala, the left and right channel of the Kundalini. And in here, this is the Shushumna, the central channel. So the Schumann resonance, the Schumann resonance is gone apparently over the last few days. People are saying it's gone. Gaia has left, and it's only her echo left. It's the light workers who have to sustain the frequency right now. I don't know. I watch a lot of this new age stuff with a little bit of healthy skepticism, but I will certainly say it's definitely been interesting days. And I've been watching so many people feel like existential birth trauma, and feeling like, where's the mom, and not feeling safe and needing their sanctuary. So it could well be. And given some of the things like the black box prophecy and some of the prophecies and the timeline shifts that we've been going through incrementally, could well be true. Not to mention that we're right in the central channel of this in a very full-on time for humanity. Okay, so that's just hopefully going to help you land with, yeah, well, that is really, we are in a really full-on karmic, crazy upgrade time. And this is it. We're right in here. So we're going to be in the central channel for like another 8 days or so, right? Then we go in there, and then we have 10 of these days. So boom, you know, and the reason I'm saying this is that you may find, if you do any Kundalini work or you do yoga, pranayama, that you may benefit from these practices at this time, because what we are effectively doing, and then doing earth work with it, because effectively this was what the sages would do, is we anchor ourselves in space and time, and you can actually clear through things. You just direct it into the central channel, and it's very favorable to do it right now. And a lot of us are doing an immersion right now in pranayama and Kundalini yoga, and it's keeping some of us just grounded and sane to have the daily practice. So this is a profound time to just find things, but you may be getting visitations of things you thought you'd move through. But now, if you give them awareness and you also apply like breath or mindfulness to it, you can probably move through some really, really big stuff for yourself and for the collective. Okay. So yeah, that's that. Okay. So I'm going to let us all land. Okay. So just, that's the Mayan systems. Just let those be with you. Connect to your central channel just before we go into the Jyotish. And just welcome in the energy of this wave spell that we're in, the blue monkey, because there is a really deep connection to weaving time therein. It's also very creative, and just loads of fireworks have just gone off as I said that. One thing to say about the system when Jose brought it through was that the sign that comes next is the human that comes after the monkey. And he believes, you know, some people call this a slave planet. Different belief systems say different things. You know, your reality is what you make it if you choose to meet your karma head on and work through it. But not all people have the conditions to do so. And I dedicate any merit from today's talk to those who are still marginalized and unable to access teachings, so that they can come forth to the golden age. So Jose believed that one of the reasons we're here is that we are here to really remember free will, and that we have free will, and to exercise it. And this is certainly one of those times in the planet where that can be a really useful thing to know that you've got. Because in natural law, we have free will, and different astrologers will say different things. Some will say you've got 20, some will say up to 30. And this is also spoken of in Vedic astrology. So in the direct science of Vedic astrology, we have fixed karmas and movable karmas and things, that you can, some things are going to come and slap you in the face and you just have to go through it, right? And this is where different remedies can be applied. You work skillfully with it. And this was what the rishis brought through, was this compassionate science, because actually if you did something awful in a past life, it might be that you've got to get your leg run over by a car, okay, because of whatever you did. But actually within the system, if you know, oh, I did this naughty thing and it's over there, and you might not know exactly what the naughty thing is, it might be that you have to do a mantra every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. What would you rather do? Okay, so Jyotish is just amazing because you have to apply yourself through discipline, and the celestial bodies, they react to your, decoding and working with them and working with their energies. This is the thing, it can appease certain energies in a very much more harmless and seamless way. So we have these things that are going to ripen. And we also have our path, our higher path, and the things that are kind of written for us. We have destiny. And we have things like destiny points in Vedic astrology, which are where you really land, where you're like, wow, it's almost like deja vu, I'm where I need to be. So a lot of our journey is a quest to get ourselves to actually realize what that is. And we do have free will, and sovereignty is such an important thing to have at the moment. We have a lot of people who misunderstand that and just use self-cherishing to not really play their part. This is one of the trappings of the new age scene that we see, which people are like, oh, it's not my flow to do that. And actually a lot of the time is just because they don't want to confront something. They're not ready to really go in. And certainly within Vedic astrology, the teachings are, it's very based on how we can help people to find their dharma and achieve moksha, liberation from this samsaric karmic computer game. And we have some free will in there. So you see, sometimes something will mature. It might mature in a certain way, but you can displace it. And some things you do have agency over. And actually, when you divide up the power of each celestial body, so they're like 7, and then think that you've got 25 or 30% free will. Actually, if you think of the influence of, say, Saturn wants to make you learn a lesson, yes, Saturn's got like 8% or whatever power to do that, but you've got the strongest bank account in free will, okay? So it's about how you can mindfully apply this to actually find your highest point that's idiosyncratic for you, because these codes are really helpful for, what sort of person you are, but everything has loads of different connotations to it. So if we look at, say, the first house or the 6th house or whatever, if you look into astrology, they've got many, many different fractal meanings assigned to what happens when things are in those houses. So how it's going to pan out can never be read in a black and white way for someone. It's guidelines, and your application through love and through devotion to a higher timeline, if you're ready, is how you can apply your free will. So it's actually about how we do this dance with it and find our true dharma. And this is where people who just are living thinking they have free will, but it's actually whimsical self-gratification a lot of the time, are missing the boat. I was saying in a transmission the other day, the wise beings, the monks say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And if you talk to any of these truly highly realized masters, it's all about work. And Vedic astrology does look at, the suffering, and it wants us to not suffer so much. But we have to understand that suffering does exist and that we have to atone for things that we've done in past lives, but actually there's a system that's here to help us through that. So I mentioned the rishis, I mentioned the signs of light, I've mentioned the soul journey a little bit, and I mentioned a little bit these remedies. And so there are all sorts of remedies that you can do. As I've said, some of them are like really weird, you know, so because they were written a long time ago for people in India. But a lot of them, you can even devise them in your own way if you know what it is that you're trying to remedy by doing generous things or working for people, humbling the ego. And truly, a lot of living great astrologers of Jyotish will say, yeah, you don't need to do that. Like, go and do that, work in a hospice for every Tuesday, something like that. So there's ways you can apply it. And generally it's about being kind and offsetting something where you maybe marginalized somebody in the past. So even if you didn't have a Vedic astrologer, but you knew some karmic imprints, you can rectify it by just doing good acts, being generous. And it is said, you know, it's not about how many scriptures you can do or how many years you spend in an ashram. It's about generosity, humility, and compassion. That's what's going to give people moksha. So the more and more of us who can get our acts together and start to look in the right way at what's going on the planet, and actually really have found the impulse and the space where we're supposed to go to assist that's where moksha will come from. Okay, so there are these things called yogas, and so people have different combinations that activate at different times in their lives, and we have yogas, you know, some of them are a bit like wonky and some of them are super great, so we're like prone to abundance or, you know, having 5 children or whatever. And then these activate, and different karmas and different planets activate through these periods called dasha periods. So everybody has different planets running the show at different times. And so once you know that, you can kind of know, well, my karma is going to ripen in this. So you know, this year's going to be a full-on one. So I'll get prepared. And then you know what? Sometimes you see the karma ripening in front of you, but you just go, that's it. And just move through it because you know what to do. So it's a bit like, you know, people who do a natural home birth, but they're ready and they know what's going to come. And it's just there. They do it and it's done. It's like that. Okay. So then we have this karmic axis that it's represented in Western astrology as the nodal points, the south node and the north node. But in Vedic astrology, it's got such a lot more going on for it. And I've made some very provisional videos, which are up online, I think, on Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu is like the north node and Ketu is like the south node. And they have this dance that they do. So everybody's got an axis where they've got deep work to do this planet, this lifetime. So knowing your Rahu Ketu axis and where it sits is key to sort of understanding some stuff that you're going to work through. And then there are maturations of the planets and the nodal points that mean that certain things activate at certain times. You've got these dasha periods. So you suddenly can start to go, whoa, I'm coming into a karmic period. And actually, once you know, it can actually be quite fun because everything wants us to upgrade. It doesn't want us to suffer. But if we're not paying attention, it will make us suffer. And Rahu and Ketu, the planets are a little bit more, they're there, they come for you, they're sitting in a certain place. Rahu and Ketu, both, Ketu's kind of misty and Rahu's in darkness. So that's why people are very scared of Rahu, because it's exactly what you've got to go into to find your healing. So it's going into the eye of the storm and not knowing how it's going to play with you. So the more we take the resolve and go, I'm going to meet my Rahu, but you also have to do dance with your Ketu, we can just do great things in life, because I will speak about them a little bit more in a second. They both have gifts to really help us to come to a higher way of being. So just so that you know, I mentioned these palm leaf readings, just in case, you know, we do these contemporary readings, which are great, but there are these libraries sitting in India, which the rishis channeled our charts over 1,000 years ago. And there's this beautiful organization called My Palm Leaf. So it's mypalmleaf.com. It's about €200. And there are these libraries, and you send them a thumbprint, and these swamis go and they find these bundles of palm leaves with these charts written on them that were written by the rishis in a Tamil script, which is even a phonetic sacred language. And then you have this very bizarre call with these guys in India who kind of go, are you a computer software developer? No. And you have to go through all these yes, no things. And then they find your script, they find your thing, hopefully. And suddenly there's like yeses, and they're saying like, your dad's name is this, you've got this amount of sister, she's got 2 kids, you do this. And you're like, that's me. And then you say enough yeses, and they're like, okay. And then they get you, they start reading your palm leaf, and then it has markers in your life and remedies. So I had mine done last year. It was funny. There was like karmic reasons. It wasn't the right day, and then it was the right day. And they were like, you do breath work, you work with different astrological systems, and your dad's name's this, your mom's name was this, she's not with you anymore. Like, whoa, and so space and time lines up. And then they give you this reading, which it's like key dates, and when people in your family might get ill and all this stuff, and I've looked at my chart, and I'm like really able to use that alongside other readings on my own ability to read charts, to be able to go, I can see it in the chart. And it's really helped me to have guidance when somebody's like, yeah, you are going to have a home like starting to happen at the end of this year now. And I'm like, yeah, that feels good. It's been a while. So things like that. So just if that's calling to your soul, I just wanted your soul to know that those are there. There's about 1 million of them. There's only, this is interesting, the rishis, so those have been sitting there all that time, and obviously some people are not interested in this, and there isn't one for them, and sometimes it's not the right time, and then you get one. This is what happened for the guy who started the organization, and then suddenly he had a dream, and it was the moment. Now, what was I going to say? I can't remember now, but it's very good. It's a very interesting process, and they're a lovely group. It's quite surreal. It's brilliant. And for me, because I love the rishis, when this called to me, because I was like, I really want a reading from somebody really good, really connected to the rishis, and something on my Facebook one day comes up, my family's rishis, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is like a time capsule from the divine. So I was very excited and very, very happy to have a reading. And for me, it was about being in that transmission with the rishis. And yeah, they'll give you remedies to do as well. I'm almost finished my remedies now, and I'm, noticing changes. It's very good. So yeah, that's mypalmleaf.com. Okay, a little bit more about Rahu and Ketu. Again, I could speak for a month on Rahu and Ketu, and I spoke very basically about them in another presentation a while back, and it's online. So Rahu and Ketu, there's a lot of different speculation about them. Again, so I'm going to give a provisional description to help you ground with them, because we're going to talk about them in a minute. So they have this karmic component to them, and there's a mythology around them being 2 sides of one asura, one kind of demonic, kind of serpent-like creature that ended up gaining immortality but got chopped in half because it'd been naughty in how it went about that. And so the head is Rahu and the tail is Ketu. And normally people would say that, so Rahu's like hungry, can't get enough food because it's got no tummy, and Ketu's like got no head, it's kind of there but it doesn't quite know. Okay. But there's more to them, of course, than that. And they do a dance, because obviously they're both sides of the same thing. And it's almost like when you go into any polarity, you kind of become the same thing, even though it might look totally different. So where that's sitting is also going to be interesting, and where it's sitting now and where it's going to is going to be interesting. So Rahu often represents something that we brought in from a past life. So we've already got some knowledge of it. And that brings a blessing in a way, but also can become a shortcoming, because it's not got a head and it's kind of there in its zone. So it's been plopped there. It's super important. And it's got a spiritual component in many ways, because people see it's got that kind of renunciant quality because it's not so materially driven. Okay, Rahu's got more drive. It's funny because people still say Ketu does resemble Mars, and you look at where Mars is in people's charts and things like that to do more of a Ketu reading. But basically, Ketu as a limited perspective, because if you have brought something in from a past life, just like I was saying with some of these things before, we're different now. We come with this exact life now, and that's why we need to know how we're presenting. So sometimes it's got like, yeah, I've done this before. Yeah, I know how it works. It's like, yeah, you did that 1664, you know, what about now? And so part of Ketu's journey is actually to go into the unknown where Rahu is. And so there's certain times where that really kicks in. And Rahu then is like the darkness, but Rahu also holds a wound. And when we've got a wound, they both got wounds in them, you know, because we're trying, it's an imbalance somewhere, karmic imbalance. So when we've got a wound in something, we often are overcompensating. So that's why we can be greedy, you know, and maybe we did something wrong in a past life and we really want to atone. So we just go a bit overdrive. That can be a bit Rahu, okay, because it's not got its balance. So it's ultimately, so sometimes, for instance, somebody might have it on an axis, which is about being with other people or working with self, and they have to be at the balance right. So they may be lapsing in between these two things, and these nodal points mature at different times. So the way they're teaching people is also coming on at different times. So Rahu matures at 42, Ketu at 48. So those are when, you know, those are important milestones in a person's life, as is Saturn at 36. So there's always this dance, and you know, Rahu, because it's overcompensating sometimes and being a bit crazy, is sometimes a bit deluded. They both have delusions. They can have kind of neuroses, fantastical moments, and you know, sometimes where, I mean, Rahu can just sometimes come for people. Like, you know, we sometimes have these karmic relationships where somebody comes, don't really like them, and you're like, oh, I've just invited myself to their house, you know, that sort of thing. And you're like, well, this is going to end up funny, but you have to do it. That can be kind of Rahu, but you have to go through that because you have to learn whatever it was you have to learn. So these are great teachers, and there's an uncomfortability, but ultimately, you know, well, then what happens is after you've gone through Rahu and you've sort of got to your Ketu point, your life is really supposed to, in some ways, you know, when people say life begins at 40 and all of this, you know, your Rahu and Ketu are maturing in your 40s. And then at 48, your Ketu, because it's more spiritual, in theory, you see, once you've matured all your Rahu crazy lessons, it's not meaning Rahu is going to go away for sure, but you kind of understand it a bit more, so you can deal with it. And if the person has got a really badly placed Rahu, they could have a really hard life, and this incarnation could be really hard for them. And so Ketu kind of from 48 wants you to be kind of having a spiritual component to your life, and yeah, you know, being related to and concerned about the true things, because it's really wanting us. It's the closest to moksha, to liberation of the signs. It's not a true planet, but it's the closest to liberation. So it's from 48 onwards we really can start to, if we have a spiritual persona, that will start to be felt more and things like that, and where it is in your chart is going to start kicking in. So yeah, I think that's good for them. Okay, so now we're really talking about no. Okay, so Rahu is presently in Taurus, and Scorpio, Ketu's in Scorpio, and that's a good thing, because if you even think about it, and I talked about materialism and wanting stuff, Taurus is quite into sensuality and luxury and comfort and things like that. So Rahu's quite happy there, and Ketu's kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of deeper connected to spirit world. Scorpio is life and death, and it's quite a spiritual planet, well, not planet, placement, house. No, sign. Sorry, I'm getting really tired. I'm gonna have a glass of water. Right, regroup. Okay, so basically Scorpio and Ketu's getting on well because there's that kind of spiritual hidden bit to it. So you can see that's a very short, basic description of them being quite comfortable there. But if you go further and we look at this time, what is the shadow of Scorpio? The shadow of Scorpio is like being manipulative, being kind of narcissistic a little bit sometimes, extremist, life and death. And what is Taurus? Taurus is like the body. It can be connected to health. It can be connected to sexuality and things like that. So we've got, if you look at what's going on the planet, we've got Ghislaine Maxwell case, we've got COVID, and a lot of people are very worried about people dying because they don't necessarily understand that death can be conscious. So we've had this really interesting karmic journey with this axis of these two. Sitting very activated and almost like a dance between the two. And I'm going to speak most particularly about Taurus. Rahu's been in Kritika, and Kritika is the Pleiades, but it's also really like cutting like a knife. And people have been like that, but it's also been a very big time for people really thinking about, do I get on with these people anymore? Is this comfortable for me to hang out with these people? And a real cull of a lot of things. So not only are we having culling of services, but a lot of culling of like our personal ecosystems. So that's really, really chunky. And we're gonna go the nodes go backwards. So we're actually going to go from this kind of body, I'll call it life, death, manipulation, especially manipulation and excess and things like that story. We're now going to move, these are going to start moving from March and April. And then they keep moving until later in the year because they go through they're always at 180 degrees from each other, but how they're going to move into another house is not exactly opposite in the way the signs look. So Rahu's going to go into Aries first, and then Ketu's going to go into Libra. And that is very much, so we got Aries first. So people are going to go back into, there's going to be a whole thing back into who am I? Because Aries is very much, and leadership, there will be stuff up about leadership, but who am I and sense of self. And it's interesting, that's going to be up. And a lot of people over COVID time, there have been a lot of people who have been distracting themselves, because they don't want to go within. And it's almost like they wanted us to have 3 runs of it, 3 years of it. So it's, please go within, please go within. So people are going to probably go very into that because it's Rahu. So there's suddenly going to be this, I need to go within to find the answers. Some astrologers are saying a lot of people are going to become very body conscious and they're going to go to the gym, but working out for 20 hours rather than 1 and stuff like this. So there's also that sense of, people probably going out, it's time to look after me and my health and find out who I am. And Aries is quite domineering. It's going to go into Rahu, and then Ketu's coming in and coming into Libra. And where we've had all this polarity, and if you think of Scorpios, if Scorpio gets pissed off, it attacks. Libra is then coming in, and Ketu's coming into Libra. So there's going to be this sense Libras like to listen to people, to be more understanding, have a more harmonious setting. So there's likely, after all this head-to-head stuff and conflict where people just don't want to listen to each other, I mean, if you look at when that started, you'll see that started pretty much when Rahu and Ketu went into Taurus and Scorpio. It's suddenly going to come Libra. So people are probably going to go to their neighbor who they thought they had a conflict with. Actually, let's sit down and have a cup of tea. And they will listen a little bit, but it's almost like they're not ready yet because there's still a karma between a sense of self and sense of relationships and communication. And that's going to be a big thing in this year, is communication. So they're going to be in this discussion, but it's almost like they're not ready yet. They're still, it's almost like the Libra where it's sitting, with Ketu being in the Libra, it won't be quite ready yet. So I think we're going to have these dances where people will go into, yeah, I'm just going to make friends with everybody. And then they might realize, actually, this doesn't feel right. And then they're going to go back to self. And then they might go over the top with that and then be very, oh, it's all about me. And then realize, no, I need to interact with people. And it's almost, I feel, because of the way the placements are moving, we're going to have this dance between community self, because it's not quite balanced yet. It's not the time for the new communities because we're preparing. And so people will be really in this kind of existential metaphysical discussion of who am I and who am I with people and how do I harmonize? And they'll have to go in and out of that. Rahu moves into Bhairani. And Bhairani is very much, it's quite a life and death energy. It's a vulva. So there's a lot about sort of procreation energy. So from mid-January, it's got to have a lot more creator energy to it with our Rahu, but that's not just yet, okay? And you're going to see why I'm mentioning that later. And then, yeah, I'm just going to keep on the Rahu for now because that's where people's main journey will be. Yeah, and I can't see the time, so I'll just keep going. Okay, so to give this more context, I'm looking right now today at Jupiter and Saturn because they're the biggies. And when you know a bit about where they're moving to, you can really understand the trends and actually understand where you're at right now. And we have these things called nakshatras, which are constellations of stars. So in Vedic astrology, we also look at the different constellations that are affecting the planets, and we call them lunar mansions as well, because how they relate to the moon at birth is a very, very deep identifying point of a personality. And so Jupiter's journey is going to be really important for people, and it's a beautiful journey that we're on. It's so exciting. And so you may be getting inklings of this. So I'm just really happy to be able to share this, and it will also help you understand some of what I've shared before. So Jupiter just at the end of December came into Shatabhishak, and Shatabhishak is a nakshatra that's called the veiling star. So it's a lot about connecting to mysteries, secrets. We have a lot of secrets coming out and people suddenly going, we want to know, but probably other people wanting to preserve secrets. It's also about universal law. So again, this whole thing on knowing natural law, that's going to be up for people. It's a very deep constellation linked to healing. It's also called the 100 Physicians. It's quite a hermit, it's quite introverted, and it also works with like herbs and plants and shamanism. So what I saw was a lot of people like, I don't know what I'm doing for New Year's Eve. And these would be people who maybe go out normally. And you might feel a bit of a hermit. Now in the global north, that's no problem. It's hermit o'clock. So again, it's not quite New Year yet. Even though I'm talking about different systems, the stars are saying you don't need to go out. You do your healing, go into the mystery, do research, look into things. Jupiter is wanting that. Okay, so if you're feeling not very sociable right now, I just want to give you the insight that Jupiter is really saying to people, it's not party time just yet. Okay. Now, from the end of February, Jupiter then moves into Bhadrapada, and this is the burning star. This is an interesting one. So, you know, people who have a Kundalini awakening overnight and end up like maybe a little bit psychotic or, you know, troubled. This is a little bit like how Bhadrapada is. And it has a tendency, it's also like people who go to a ceremony and then get into kind of sorcery a little bit from, you know, awakening too fast in the wrong way. So there's like an explosion coming. And this is going to be from the end of February to the end of April. And it's like a two-faced man. It's got this spiritual possibility, but it doesn't know how to manage it yet. It's burning. So it's like, you know, when we say spiritually, be careful or you get burned. Okay, that is the risk. So there's cosmic energy starting to rise in the collective, and we can expect that a lot of people who are on the cusp are going to pop. Okay, the best thing to do in these two months is to really look at your own purification. And if you can use the fire energy to maybe pop you know, to activate some things once Mercury's come out of retrograde, but don't do anything silly. Just know that it could have almost like a Rahu energy of just going a bit too much into something. And, you know, sometimes we have people who are new to spirituality and they're actually verging on sorcery because it's manipulative. So you might see a lot of that. And I want to say that it's up in the field. We're seeing so many people who've gone to too many plant medicine ceremonies or haven't had space held. There's a lot of people with entities and wonky energy at the moment. So you can expect that it could get quite murky in February and March. So you can utilize that. If you know how to work with your Kundalini and your energies, or you have purification practices, if you keep using them, you'll be able to surf the energy really nicely. But otherwise, you know, people will just get burnt, you know. So this is just really good to have the heads up on that, because after that, the goodies come. So I think it's late April. I've written it down somewhere else. Jupiter then moves into Uttarabhadrapada. And this is like the happy version of that. It's like growing from its crazy Kundalini awakening and too much ayahuasca to, okay, I'm going to do disciplined work. I'm going to read about the masters. And it has the total possibility of becoming this enlightened sage being. And so this is more humanitarian. I mean, what I see at the moment, it's so funny because it's so up anyway. We're already getting the insights about it. It's like cryptocurrency and lots of this pseudo spirituality where people are, you know, I just do ecstatic dance. And it's like, well, yeah, but how's that helping people in Bangladesh? You know, this is it. We have to remember we're all part of the oneness. And this is more the way of the Bodhisattva, where true enlightenment can happen, is humanitarian, compassionate ways and balanced spirituality. And in a way, yeah, I'll talk about this later, but yeah, in a way, we can also utilize Purvabhadrapada by the one before it, by utilizing your spirituality in a humble way and not being like that sort of spiritual narcissism, like, I just donated $1,000 to the homeless, you know, that spiritual narcissism, you know, people who are like, you know, just, you know, they're doing it for likes, you know. So really humbly grounded spirituality in Purvabhadrapada would be great, because then it really helps people to cultivate true spirituality and humility and compassion, which is sorely missing in so many settings right now, and is creating a lot of chaos. But we can see that there's this kind of exorcism coming through. For those of you who are energy workers, it's really good to be aware of this, hey? So you can already see it lining up. So just know this is coming. So this is where, and this is going to be a feature, Uttarabhadrapada, until about March next year. And Jupiter is going to retrograde and come back, but it's going to be keeping Uttarabhadrapada as far as I remember. And this is the penultimate of the nakshatras. So in terms of the ascension process of the constellations, we're at 26 of number 27. There are 28, but 28 is a secret one. So we're coming very close to the crown chakra. So this maintenance of divine bliss and emptiness and abiding in these non-conceptual, non-dualistic states is possible, okay? So from April time, and other astrologers, even Western astrologers, saying, yeah, it's really up. A lot of people maybe be realizing they can astral travel, or, you know, a lot of people are going to be coming online, and we've all known we're preparing for that. This is where it starts happening. And interestingly, because we obviously had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that really kicked off the COVID thing, Saturn's not that far behind. It's moving more slowly, but Saturn's also in this ascension journey. And so in 2023, we come into Revati, and I can't pronounce these things right because I'm from Ireland, not from India. So we're coming to the highest nakshatra with Jupiter, but actually Saturn's on a journey up. as well, and it's pretty high up as well. So I'm going to be explaining that in the next slide. So it's like Saturn, you know, we've got Jupiter's kind of expanding the things, but Saturn's like, yeah, let's do this right, so we don't have to come back and do this again. And it's in high nakshatras as well. And I think that's why a lot of people are really talking about this big shift that's happening between 2025 and 27, which is spoken of by wisdom keepers that we're friends with here in Mexico, by tribes in Colombia, in the gene keys system, all of these things. You can see it from this ascension through these nakshatras that's happening. So it's a really good time to purify. Again, you know, in those months for the proper new year, if you're purifying, that's the time when really people, true, like adept astrologers say is a good time to purify. And here, the constellations are saying to do it. And then we can all actually step into what is true Tantra, which is a true weaving with the universe, and to be able to navigate, you know, bliss states and the reality, and be able to do humanitarian work and not bypassing. Okay. So I'm almost finished, by the way, just in case any of you are worried about the time. So Saturn is currently in Shravana, and its sign is an ear. And it's the start of learning and listening, and to some degrees teaching. It's got a connection to things like the media and, you know, published journalism and things like that. And so Saturn is like karmic, constraining, wants us to get our lessons about things. And Saturn has been sitting there. It's leaving that soon, but it's been very much, you know, Saturn, just like Rahu and Ketu, will be like, here's your lesson, now overdose on it to try to get us to understand. So if we look at the mainstream media and all the crazy bullshit that's everywhere, and again, what's happening with Rahu and Ketu is, you know, there's this mechanism that's here to distract people to ultimately like, make it stop, I'm going to have to go within. But it's like we can feel there's a little bit more of that to happen. That's because Shravana is still there and Rahu and Ketu are still, they haven't gone into their new bits yet. So you can see how there's this like life and death, me, body, sex, stories, false news, fake news, mainstream media, COVID nonsense. And it's just like that. And then basically we'll move out of that. So it's a really good time to look at what you're listening to and to take on what Saturn's trying to teach you. And obviously, I want to say that everybody has placements of these. You've all got these, but you will all have this activating different houses. So where your Rahu Ketu is, where your Jupiter is, where your Saturn is, these are all going to be activating certain things for your own idiosyncratic story, right? Okay, so anyway, I think that's clear enough that we are bamboozled and whatever we want to say, just all over the place with this crazy stuff. So ultimately, it's really wanting us to listen and learn. And obviously, we've also got this aspect where a lot of people have been able, those who haven't been in distraction mode, have been able to do loads of extra learning and get all upgraded. Like the first waivers, maybe, we're all like, wow, this is brilliant. I get to be on retreat and do all these new courses and make courses for other people. So you can see Shravana, its blessings as well. In mid-Feb, it's moving. So it's moving into Dhanishta. And this is the star symphony. And this is truly giving abundance and fame. If you think of a symphony orchestra, you can think of a children's symphony orchestra where they're playing like really bad Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and there's cacophony and it's all out of time. Or you can think about one of the Halle orchestra or whatever. You have to cultivate a good sense of timing. And Dhanishta, it lends itself well, if people work with it well, to helping you to kind of create a prototype to then go live with, to perform, whatever that is. And it can bring fame in doing that. So for people who've been able to cultivate something in these times, a lot of people are feeling like, when am I to go live? When am I to go live? And that's sort of like, hold on, and it's wanting us to get our sense of timing right. Okay, so this is, again, if you look, Mercury is going to be retrograde. There are going to be things that are slowing us down, because also that's mirrored in Dhanishta, and Saturn's always like, don't rush it. So what we've got is Jupiter, you know, starting to give us this spiritual awareness, but it's like, don't frazzle. And then, you know, we've got until March next year. Boom, another firework. We've got until March next year, and Dhanishta there kind of chaperoning us. So I know a lot of people are thinking when to go live with stuff. If you kind of tune in, learn more about Dhanishta, connect with Saturn, you can get guidance from the celestial bodies as to when to go live with something. Okay, finally, I'd said I'd do this, and I'm going to talk people through this quickly. This is looking, so I've told you these bits of different systems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the wave spells and the trisenas, these 13-day cycles that have a theme, that help us to understand. They help me organize events, things like that, and how those energies are going to be until about just after the 10th of April. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in the monkey wave spell. So that's quite creative. It's weaving time. Mercury's going to go retrograde during this wave spell. And in the sacred calendar, we're in Trisena, which is about really finding the path, being the true road. Can be linked to helping others, but I'm feeling like where this is at the moment, it's like we're surfing, we're in the central channel, we're weaving with time, and then we're also finding the road for us. Okay, so this is an important time, and I'm letting stuff clean so we can reorientate. Okay, and then from the 22nd of January, we're going to go into the seed wave spell, and a few days after that, we go into Can Trisena. So seed wave spell speaks for itself. It could be about seeding new ideas. It can also be good. It has quite a social aspect to it sometimes. It can also be about that for a community. And then we're coming into Can Trisena, which is Kundalini and Serpent. And guess what? We end up back in those gap days where we're connected more deeply with the double helix structure when we're in that. You know, you just can't write this stuff. So that's where these systems are actually meeting each other. So from that time, it can be a good time to be working with Kundalini energy and life force and sacred sexuality and getting your own life force up. And it's also about wisdom and sacred wisdom. But again, it's almost like a precursor if you catch it the right way, because Can has a similar medicine to Purva Bhadrapadra in that it can burn too much. It can just go a bit too crazy. So yeah, you just need to be careful of the serpent energy there. Okay, then Mercury goes direct as we enter the earth wave spell. So this groundedness is starting to come through. And we're going to be, that's going to give people a deeper sense of navigation. So Mercury goes retrograde, as you know, don't really know, things seem unclear. And we literally come into the earth wave spell. In Vedic astrology, Mercury is associated with the element of earth. Okay, so boom, back to earth, back to, okay, getting the compass point right. Okay, and interestingly, the Trisena in the sacred calendar is Tihax, and Tihax is very much like a sword of truth. Okay, so it's just like, I know what we need to do. Boom. Okay, and it's not going to mince its words. So you're going to have that clarity coming out of Mercury to bring in a grounded sense of focus. Okay, which is really, really useful to get you lined up for the proper new year. Okay. And then from around the 17th of February, we come into the dog wave spell. And the dog is very much about soul tribe, which so many people are yearning. And this whole effect that we've had with Rahu, Kritika, about culling, cutting off things. The dog is often that yearning that people have, but also that presentation of truly resonant people who are Dharma brothers and sisters who are here for the journey. So sometimes you have the early days, bit of a, who's my tribe? And then there's this growth of the understanding of the transpersonal telepathic relating that many of us are coming into, and a refining of that which will come in, and that will more deeply be articulated, because as well, in the sacred calendar, we're coming into bats, which is the monkey weaving time. So there's a real possibility that we can do kind of multidimensional soul tribe weaving then, which is going to be really good. And Saturn moves into Dhanishta right at that time. So it's a really good time to start to go into a sort of dream time as well, but also to look at who's coming into my life right now. And really make use of that, and ask Cosmos as well. You ask, say, please let the higher selves of the people who are supposed to be in my life for the greater good for the next chapter come in. Okay, you can really do that then. So then again, this kind of weaving continues, because then in the Dreamspell calendar, we go into the night wave spell, which is like the grandmothers. It's the twilight, but when we dream and we enter the collective consciousness, and we go into those liminal spaces where a lot of us work, where we're sort of working also almost in the mythic realm as well. This is where this is a really good time to do like journeys with your friends who are these co-creators, and start to do the weaving. And look, it's beautiful because it's just happening just before the astrological new year. So, the true natural laws, you dream before you do. So we've got this beautiful template here to go into, like, true, for me, project management is having like dreamings and quantum journeys with my co-creators, and doing those, when these sorts of astrologies kick in, because then the universe will just line it up for us when we're doing it. Because when we do it from collective, from the heart, this is when we're writing the timelines together, because we're doing what we came to do. So the dog wave spell's preparing you, finding your tribes, the night's doing that. And that ends up being the energy of the seed in the Guatemalan system. And in this way, it actually comes in with, so what space are we going to use, and who's got what? So it's almost like the dreaming is going to do that, then it's going to help us anchor the physical reality. Then we come into Warrior Wave Spell from the 15th of March, and this is going to be when we come into the equinox, because this is the 13-day cycle. And the warrior is, it's a noble, it's like a Shambhala warrior, it's not a fighter. It's a being that's connected to fearlessness and a higher consciousness. So it's that, it's like a bodhisattva quality or dakini quality that can bring down and channel that divine wisdom and articulate that with fearlessness. It's got a deep connection to intelligence, so pure innate intelligence, not like 2 + 2, stuff. And that is moving into Noch, and Noch is also linked to like earth intelligence, cerebral intelligence. So there's like a journey there. We dream, we seed, we intelligently talk to the universe, and then we actually cognitively get the insights to synthesize it. That's all happening over equinox as we start that new year. We move from Pisces into Aries, and a lot of that is going to be, it's going to come, the new year will come a little bit later in the Vedic chart. Then we come into the 28th of March, and there's an element within the moon wave spell which is about self-remembrance. And sometimes warrior and moon are both good times to also move through any old trauma, but in a nice way. And the moon's quite yin. It's also a portal to deep consciousness. I'm just checking it is that. Yeah, it is. So it's also good for purification. So you may have done some purifying. You're still in that window of Purva Bhadrapada, okay? So a lot of people do a detox or a purification at the beginning of the new astrological year. So moon is also there, lined up with you in that system, that if you wish to do that, you can. And then moon is leading into this quest again for, now that I've purified and cleared and I'm remembering who I am and I've got more clarity and I've done another layer. And if you think, we're also starting this journey between Rahu and Ketu, between self and others, you then get this new chance to look at community, because you're entering into the version of the dog that's in the sacred calendar. And You also get a chance, because of the moon being there, that that dog can be prone to addiction. So you may be getting a chance to move through addictive cycles, okay? And so that could be a good time to maybe set out the resolutions and move through things so that you're ready, because, you know, as we come into late April, we start to be in Uttarabhadrapada, the true yogic, the true sage, okay? So finally, you're coming in from the 10th of April to wind wave spell, which is obviously spirit communication, but it's also a really good time. You see a lot of people often go, it's Aries, I'm going to do everything now. And often we have to land with the New Year's energies and also land with the Vedic New Year too. So this is a good time to start to have those meetings after you're dreaming. And, you know, you've definitely not got Mercury retrograde anymore. So that can be a really nice time with a lot of communications, and maybe anything that's future partnerships and things like that, like stuff that you've been seeing and it's sticking. You can be then, right, let's talk, okay? But I like to have these observational periods, and that's how permaculture works. You observe before you do, okay? And there's a sense of that responsibility in that, because you've got the wind happening in the Dreamspell calendar, but in the sacred calendar, you're in Akbal, which is still about dreaming a bit. So you can then communicate and dream a little bit, okay? And it's interesting because you've got the wind communicating, but you've got this aspect of dreaming coming in. And Jupiter's coming into Pisces right then, and Jupiter in Pisces, the ultimate dreamer. So you've got this whole new, like, let's talk. We've got this new energy coming, but you still need to apply some of this to the dream time and observe your dreams and land with that Pisces energy that's coming through. And when I say Jupiter's into Pisces, that's because it's catching up in the Vedic system. So Jupiter is in Aquarius at the present moment in the Vedic system. And then Jupiter's coming into Pisces and will remain there, I think, for the rest of the year. Yeah, very end of April, very lovely, because we come in, when we're hitting this sage energy, this magic yogi energy, when Jupiter comes into Uttarabhadrapada, we're entering the ego wave spell, which really, it has this humanitarian vision, just like Uttarabhadrapada, to help us to fly above, to see the bigger picture. It's a visionary for its community, and it always brings in abundance because it's one step ahead. It can kind of see where trouble's coming, it can see where's good stuff coming, and it does it altruistically for its community. And Uttarabhadrapada has this humanitarian aspect to it. And interestingly, the sacred calendar Trisena that it's going to be playing with is Ahmak, and Ahmak is about redemption and forgiveness. So you see, we have this whole thing of this interpersonal Rahu and Ketu with Aries and Libra kicking in. And this, oh, I want to sit down and have a cup of tea with you now after fighting with you online for the last 2 years. That sort of stuff kicking in. Ahmak's coming in, and you can see that maybe people are going to start to be like, actually, you're my brother. We don't need to give a shit if you're vaccinated or I'm vaccinated or whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay, so that's a good sign there. So people starting to maybe see the bigger picture out of this thing. That's kind of written there, and redemption and forgiveness. So that was quite a mammoth thing. Thank you for, you know, holding in there. So I just want to 0 point that, you know, there's a lot that's gone in there. There's so much more I could say, but I hope you understand how immense it is that these systems from all these different times are all 0 pointed in on that new year and April. And, you know, this is, I just saw some Vedic astrologers, right, you know, new stuff, people are going to have changed a lot in these months. April, May, we're going to see, and people are saying, you know, COVID's pretty much done with by the end of March, okay? And that's, the astrology is done with, okay, too. So, yeah, it's all lined up, and just know that this is a really nice time for cultivating, and that new energies are going to emerge from April in a big way, and it's all lined up in that way. So, so yeah, this is a really good time. If this awareness, I hope, will propel you into knowing how to follow your own guidance, but that from celestial bodies as well, so that you can just be one step ahead, so you don't, you know, peak too early, or don't burn yourself by launching the wrong thing. Or, you know, we're all prone to Rahu moments. Sometimes we get overzealous in some way, and then, you know, we miss the true moment. So just know there's this very beautiful divine energy coming, and this bodes very well for the collective. And obviously where it is in your own chart will also mean different things, but I hope that helps you. So I just want to give gratitude to the day keepers, Jose Arguelles, and the rishis and all the celestial bodies for their guidance and their presence to help us to move through these things. Does anybody have any questions now? That was a lot of information. Okay, well, I know I went over an hour and a half. I apologize for that. But yeah, it's done. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop recording.
Yeah, I had